Nothing was wrong, and yet I was disappearing. 0.5. If you've ever stayed in a love that felt quiet but lonely, this story might feel familiar. I stayed because nothing was wrong. At least, nothing I could point to. There was no moment I could hold up and say, this is where it broke. No raised voices, no slammed doors, no betrayal that left marks anyone else could see. If someone asked me how we were doing, I would have said, we're fine. And I would have meant it, or at least, I would have believed I did. We laughed at the same shows. We knew each other's coffee orders. We had routines that fit together without friction. Love from the outside looked quiet, stable, safe, and maybe that's why I stayed. Because leaving something that is clearly painful feels understandable. Leaving something that looks peaceful feels dramatic, ungrateful, hard to explain, even to yourself. I stayed because I told myself that love doesn't always feel intense. That maybe what I wanted was unrealistic. That comfort is supposed to replace excitement at some point. I stayed because I didn't want to be someone who keeps searching for something better. I wanted to be someone who knows how to commit, how to grow roots, how to be content. There were days I looked at our life and thought, this is what people work toward, a shared space, familiar mornings, the quiet confidence of knowing where you belong. And I told myself that if I felt something missing, it was probably my fault. Maybe I was restless. Maybe I was asking for too much without realizing it. I didn't want to be that person, the one who is never satisfied, the one who mistakes peace for emptiness. So I stayed. I stayed because it felt easier to doubt myself than to doubt us. I stayed because there was no clear reason to leave. And somehow that felt like a reason to stay longer. I stayed because love, I thought, was supposed to be patient. And I told myself that if I waited quietly enough, something inside me would settle. At first, nothing changed in ways I could notice. Life moved forward in small, ordinary steps. We ate dinner at the same table. We talked about work. We made plans for weekends that sounded nice but felt distant even as we discussed them. If you had watched us, you wouldn't have seen absence. You would have seen calm. But something began to soften at the edges. It was subtle, the kind of change that doesn't announce itself. I started choosing my words more carefully. Not because I was afraid, just because it seemed unnecessary to explain certain things. I would think about sharing a feeling, then decide it wasn't important enough. Or that it would complicate a good evening, or that I could process it on my own. So I did. I became very good at processing things on my own. Sometimes I would start a sentence and stop halfway through. Not because I forgot what I was saying, but because I suddenly couldn't tell if it mattered. And when someone doesn't ask you to finish your sentence, you learn how to let it fade. There were moments during meals when I realized I was chewing longer than necessary. Listening to the sounds of forks and plates, waiting for something I couldn't name. Conversation wasn't missing, but presence was thinner. Like listening to music from another room, I started noticing how often I said, "It's fine," without checking if it was true. How often I smiled because it felt like the appropriate response. Not forced, just automatic. We texted during the day, but the messages became efficient. Updates, logistics, running late, on my way. Do we need milk? I would stare at the screen sometimes, thinking about sending something more personal, something small but honest. Then I'd erase it. Not because it was wrong, just because it felt like effort, and I wasn't sure where that effort would land. At night, we lay next to each other, close enough to touch without actually touching. I could feel warmth, but not connection, and that's a strange thing to explain, because warmth feels like enough until it doesn't. I started falling asleep facing the other direction, not intentionally, just naturally, as if my body knew something before my mind did. There were no big fights to distract me from noticing the small things. No dramatic moments to make everything feel justified. So the small things became very loud in their quietness. I noticed how often I adjusted myself to fit the space between us. How often I lowered my voice instead of raising a thought. I noticed that when I was excited about something, I softened it before sharing, rounded the edges, removed the intensity, as if enthusiasm needed to be moderated, not because I was told to, just because it didn't seem to land the way it once did. I noticed that when I was sad, I waited for it to pass instead of reaching out, because I didn't want to bring heaviness into a relationship that was otherwise fine. And I told myself this was maturity, that this is what adults do. They regulate. They don't expect their partner to hold everything. I told myself I was becoming stronger. But sometimes strength feels a lot like loneliness. I started keeping thoughts to myself, not because I was private, but because I wasn't sure where to put them. There were moments I would look at the person beside me and feel a strange distance that had nothing to do with space, like standing next to someone at a bus stop, knowing you're headed to different places. No resentment, no anger, just a quiet awareness. I became very good at not needing much. At least, that's what it looked like. Inside, something was slowly dimming. Not disappearing, but just lowering its volume. I laughed less loudly, cared less intensely. I stopped asking certain questions, not because I didn't want the answers, but because I wasn't sure I wanted to reveal the wanting. Wanting felt vulnerable, and vulnerability, when it isn't met, becomes heavy. So I made myself lighter, easier. I started saying, "Don't worry about it," when I actually meant, "I wish you would notice." But wishing silently is safer than asking out loud. At least, that's what I told myself. The days blended together in a way that felt peaceful, but slightly unreal. Like watching your own life through a window. I was present, I was functioning, I was loved, in a way that was steady and dependable. And yet, sometimes in the middle of ordinary moments, I would feel a small ache. Not sharp, not dramatic, just a quiet pressure in my chest, like something pressing outward with nowhere to go. I would notice it while washing dishes, or folding laundry, or brushing my teeth next to another person, both of us facing the mirror, not looking at each other. I would notice how easy it was to move through routines without really meeting, and I would wonder, briefly, if this is what it's supposed to feel like. Then I would push the thought away. Because questioning something that isn't broken feels dangerous. I didn't want to create problems where none existed. I didn't want to be the reason something peaceful became complicated, so I kept quiet. I became an expert at interpreting silence as contentment, at mistaking stability for intimacy. And in doing so, I slowly stepped further away from parts of myself that needed to be seen. Not all at once, just enough that I didn't notice the distance growing. The realization didn't arrive as a single moment. It came in fragments, a pause that lingered too long, a response that never came, a look that passed over me instead of landing. Small things. I noticed how often I was the one reaching first, starting conversations, suggesting closeness, and how natural it felt to stop. Not in protest, just in fatigue. I noticed how quiet I had become. Not because I had nothing to say, but because saying it no longer felt like an invitation, more like an interruption. I noticed how often I filled empty spaces with noise, a podcast, the TV, anything to avoid the sound of my own thoughts, asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. There were moments I would catch my reflection and feel unfamiliar, like I was looking at someone who had learned how to be small without realizing it. And that scared me a little, but not enough to act, because fear, when it's quiet, is easy to live with. I didn't wake up one day knowing something was wrong. I just slowly stopped feeling like myself, and I told myself that this is what long-term love looks like, that maybe the version of me I missed was younger, more naive, unrealistic. I told myself I was evolving, but evolution shouldn't feel like erasure. And yet, I kept going. It wasn't one thought that changed everything. It was the accumulation of many small ones that refused to disappear. The thought that I hadn't been truly listened to in a long time. The thought that I didn't know how to ask for more without feeling like I was asking for too much. The thought that I felt lonelier beside someone than I did on my own. That one was hard to admit, because loneliness is supposed to come from absence, not from being next to someone who cares about you. And yet, I started noticing how relieved I felt when I was alone, how my shoulders dropped, how my thoughts expanded. I noticed how I became more myself in spaces where I wasn't trying to be understood, and that felt backwards. Love is supposed to make you feel more like yourself, not less. But I didn't name it as a problem, I just held it quietly. Like holding something fragile you're not sure you're allowed to have. Eventually, something shifted, not outwardly. Nothing changed in a way anyone else would notice. But inside, I stopped waiting. I stopped waiting to be seen without asking. Stopped waiting for curiosity that never came. Stopped waiting for a feeling that I couldn't describe, but always hoped would return. I didn't leave, not physically, but I started standing in a different place inside myself. I began listening to my own reactions more closely, not judging them. Just noticing. I noticed the moments I felt invisible, the moments I felt heavy for wanting more, the moments I felt tired of explaining myself to silence. And instead of pushing those feelings away, I let them exist. I didn't turn them into decisions. I didn't turn them into accusations. I just let them be real. That alone changed something. I stopped convincing myself that everything was fine when it wasn't. I stopped needing to prove that this love was enough. And in that space, something quiet but steady began to return. Not clarity, not certainty, just honesty. Honesty with myself. If you're listening to this right now, late at night, alone with your thoughts, I want you to know something. You're not imagining it. The absence you feel doesn't need to be dramatic to be real. You don't need a clear reason to feel the way you do. You don't need permission to notice that something inside you has grown quiet. Staying too long in a place where you slowly disappear doesn't make you loyal. It makes you tired. And noticing that doesn't mean you're ungrateful. It means you're listening. You don't have to decide anything tonight. You don't have to name what comes next. Just notice where you are. Notice how much of yourself you've been holding back. Notice how heavy that feels. And maybe, for the first time in a long while, let yourself sit with the truth of that feeling. Not to fix it, not to change it, just to hear it. That's where everything quietly begins. There was a particular kind of tiredness that started to follow me. Not the kind that sleep fixes, not the kind that comes from working too much. It was the tiredness of constantly adjusting my tone, adjusting my expectations, adjusting how much of myself I allowed to surface. It showed up in small, almost invisible ways. I would reread a message before sending it, then rewrite it, then decide not to send it at all. Not because it was risky, but because it felt unnecessary. I began to anticipate silence so well that it stopped surprising me. When a message went unanswered for hours, I didn't feel anxious. I felt prepared. I filled the space with other things: work, music, scrolling. I learned how to not wait, and that skill, once learned, doesn't stay contained. It seeps into how you breathe, how you speak, how much you allow yourself to need. At dinner, I noticed how often we ate without really sharing the meal. We talked, yes, but the conversation moved around the surface of our lives: plans, schedules, stories that didn't require much response. I stopped asking questions that opened doors, not consciously, just instinctively. Because when doors open and no one walks through them, you eventually stop opening them. I noticed how I would nod along while part of me drifted elsewhere. Not bored, just absent, as if I was slowly stepping out of my own life without leaving the room. I didn't feel unhappy. That's the part that confused me. I felt functional, capable, stable. There was food on the table, someone to come home to, a life that made sense on paper. But I also felt strangely untouched. Like nothing was quite reaching me anymore. Even joy felt muted. I laughed but softly, smiled but briefly. Big emotions felt embarrassing somehow, as if they belonged to an earlier version of me who hadn't learned restraint yet. I told myself I was maturing, that this is what long-term love looks like when it grows up. Less intensity, more calm. But calm shouldn't feel like being alone in a room with someone else. Sometimes, lying in bed, I would feel the urge to say something true, something vulnerable. Then I'd imagine the response. Not rejection, just neutrality. And that was enough to stop me. Neutrality doesn't hurt loudly. It just drains you slowly. So I stayed quiet. And in that quiet, parts of me began to shrink. I stopped sharing certain thoughts altogether. Not the important ones, the small ones. The passing feelings, the observations that didn't matter but still felt human. Those are the first things to go, because they're the easiest to dismiss. And when no one notices they're gone, you learn something about your place. I started becoming more agreeable, more flexible, less complicated. I didn't argue, didn't push. I told myself I was being understanding. But understanding, when it's one-sided, becomes self-erasure. I would feel a flicker of disappointment and immediately smooth it over. It's fine, I'd say, and most of the time I believed it. Belief can be a habit, so can silence. The strange thing was how gradual it all was. There was no line I crossed, No version of me that disappeared overnight. Just a series of tiny concessions, a thought unspoken, a feeling minimized, a need postponed, until one day, postponing felt permanent. I noticed how I had stopped imagining the future in detail, not because I didn't care, but because imagining it felt oddly empty. I would think about the years ahead and feel neutral, not sad, not excited, just blank. And that scared me more than unhappiness ever could, because sadness at least means you're still feeling. Blankness feels like being slowly unplugged. There were moments when I almost said something, moments when the words were right there, but they never came out the way I meant them to. So I swallowed them. I told myself I didn't want to create problems, that peace was more important. But peace that requires you to disappear is a fragile kind of peace. It cracks quietly. The realization when it began didn't feel like clarity. It felt like discomfort. Like wearing a sweater that used to fit but now feels too tight around the chest. You keep adjusting it, pulling at the fabric, blaming yourself for gaining weight, until one day you realize the sweater hasn't changed. You have. I started noticing how often I felt unseen, not ignored, just unnoticed, like background noise, and I wondered when I had accepted that role, not angrily, just curiously. When did I decide this was enough? I didn't confront anyone. I didn't demand change. I just began to pay attention to my own reactions, to the quiet disappointment I had learned to swallow, to the relief I felt when I was alone. That relief told me more than any argument ever could. I noticed how my body reacted to space, how my breath deepened, how my thoughts expanded, and that was new. Because love is supposed to feel like home, not like something you need a break from to remember who you are. The shift wasn't visible, but it was real. I stopped making excuses for the emptiness, stopped calling it normal, stopped blaming myself for wanting to feel more connected. I didn't label it as neglect. I didn't label it as loss. I just acknowledged that something essential had been missing for a long time. And that acknowledgement, quiet as it was, changed how I stood in my own life. I didn't leave, but I stopped disappearing. I began letting myself feel what I felt without immediately dismissing it, without translating it into something easier for someone else to hear. That alone felt like a small act of courage, not dramatic, just honest. If you're still listening, if this story feels uncomfortably familiar, I want you to know you don't need a reason that sounds serious enough to justify your feelings. You don't need proof. You don't need permission. If something inside you has been growing quieter, that matters. If you've been shrinking to keep the peace, that matters. You don't have to decide anything right now. Just notice. Notice where you stopped speaking. Notice where you stopped hoping. Notice where you stopped feeling like yourself, and stay there for a moment. Not to judge it, not to fix it, just to hear it. Because listening to yourself is often the first sound that breaks the silence. After I started listening, really listening, things didn't suddenly make sense. They became heavier, not in a dramatic way, in a grounded way. Like realizing you've been carrying something for a long time and only now noticing the weight of it on your shoulders. I began to notice how often I went through my days on autopilot. Wake up, get ready, move through responsibilities, come home. Everything worked. Nothing felt broken, and yet I felt like I was moving through someone else's life. I was present, but not involved. There's a difference between being there and being with someone. I had confused the two for a long time. The small moments kept revealing themselves, not loudly, just persistently. A conversation where my words landed and disappeared. A look I searched for and didn't find. A silence that stretched a little longer than comfort. I didn't react to these moments anymore. I didn't make them mean anything right away. I just let them register. And that was new. Before, I would immediately soften them, explain them away, tell myself I was being sensitive. Now, I let them exist, not as accusations, just as information. And slowly, I realized something quietly unsettling. I had been working very hard to feel connected, and almost no one had asked me how tired I was. I noticed how often I gave without being asked, how often I anticipated needs, moods, silences. I knew how to read the room, how to adapt, how to keep things smooth. I was good at it, too good. And I started to wonder when I learned that love meant being easy to live with. When did I decide that my needs were optional, that they could wait, that they could be smaller, that they could be invisible? There was no breaking point, just a quiet truth settling in my chest. I wasn't unhappy because of what was happening. I was empty because of what wasn't. The absence of curiosity, the absence of depth, the absence of being met. And absence is hard to explain because people look for damage. They look for wrongdoing. They look for something concrete, but absence leaves no evidence. Just a feeling, and feelings, especially quiet ones, are easy to doubt. I didn't suddenly want to leave. That's important. I didn't pack bags in my mind, didn't imagine dramatic goodbyes. I just stopped imagining myself getting smaller forever. And that shift, that was enough to change everything inside me. I began to take up a little more space, not outwardly, internally. I let myself feel disappointment without apologizing for it. Let myself feel longing without minimizing it. I didn't demand more. I just stopped pretending I needed less. There were moments when I caught myself starting to shrink again. Old habits don't disappear quickly. I would almost say, it's fine. Almost swallow something important, then pause. And choose not to. Not to confront, not to explain, just to stay honest with myself. That honesty felt unfamiliar. A little uncomfortable, but also grounding, like standing barefoot on cold floor after wearing shoes all day. The relationship didn't suddenly change. The world didn't rearrange itself, but I did. I became more aware of when I was present and when I was merely accommodating. I noticed the difference between peace and numbness, between comfort and quiet loneliness. And once you notice that difference, it's hard to unfeel it. I don't know what this story becomes after this point. That's the truth. There's no clear ending yet, no declaration, no dramatic choice, just a person standing a little more firmly inside themselves than they used to, learning to listen after a long time of staying quiet. If you're still here, still listening, maybe you recognize this place, the in-between, where nothing is wrong enough to leave, but nothing is right enough to stay unchanged. If that's where you are, you're not weak. You're not dramatic. You're not ungrateful. You're just awake. And waking up doesn't always come with clarity. Sometimes it comes with discomfort, with questions, with a quiet sense that you can't keep disappearing. You don't need to know what comes next tonight. You don't need answers. Just stay with yourself. Notice what you feel when the noise fades. Notice what parts of you are asking to be acknowledged for the first time in a long while, and don't rush to silence them. This story doesn't end here. It pauses right where you are, and maybe that pause is exactly where you begin to hear yourself again. There were days when nothing happened, and those were the hardest ones. No misunderstandings, no disappointment sharp enough to name. Just hours passing quietly. I would wake up and already feel tired, even before the day asked anything of me. Not exhausted, just drained, like something inside me had been left on overnight, humming softly, using energy I didn't realize I was losing. I began to notice how often I was bracing myself without knowing why. Bracing for silence, bracing for indifference that wasn't intentional but still landed, bracing for the familiar feeling of reaching out and landing nowhere. It wasn't painful enough to react to. It was subtle enough to normalize. And this is how it stayed for so long. The realizations came the way fog lifts, not all at once, just enough that shapes start to appear. I noticed how rarely I was asked questions that didn't have a practical purpose. Not, what time will you be home? Not, did you finish that thing? But questions that linger. Questions that suggest curiosity. Questions that make you feel like someone is still discovering you. I realized I couldn't remember the last time I felt truly seen in conversation. Heard maybe, but seen, that felt distant. I didn't feel misunderstood. That would have been easier. I felt unconsidered, and that's a quiet place to stand. There were moments when I tried to reconnect, not with words, with presence. I lingered a little longer in shared spaces, paused conversations instead of rushing through them, let silence exist without filling it. I waited, not expectantly, just open, but openness, when it isn't met, becomes exposure. So eventually, I closed again, not in bitterness, in self-protection. One night, lying awake beside someone who was already asleep, I realized something small but unmistakable. I was holding my breath, not literally, emotionally, as if I had been waiting for permission to exhale, and that permission never came. I didn't feel angry about it, just aware that I had been shrinking myself into a shape that fit the space I was given, aware that the space had not expanded in a long time. The recognition wasn't loud enough to call a revelation. It was more like a sentence repeating itself quietly until it can no longer be ignored. I am here, but I am not fully here. And once that sentence settled, I couldn't unhear it. It followed me through ordinary days, at the grocery store, in traffic. While doing things that used to feel neutral, it didn't demand action. It just asked to be acknowledged. I stopped trying to make sense of whether my feelings were justified. That question had kept me stuck for a long time. Was it bad enough? Was I asking for too much? Was this just how things are? Those questions never led anywhere, so I stopped asking them. Instead, I asked something quieter. How does this actually feel in my body? And my body answered before my mind could interfere. Tightness, heaviness, a constant low-level sadness that didn't spike, but never fully left. That answer didn't accuse anyone. It didn't assign blame. It just told the truth. The consequence of noticing wasn't a decision. It was a shift. I became less willing to disappear to maintain harmony, not outwardly, internally. I stopped translating my feelings into something more convenient. I stopped rehearsing explanations I never planned to give. I let disappointment exist without rushing to soften it. That alone changed how I walked through my days. I became gentler with myself. Not in a self-care way, in a permission way. Permission to admit that something important was missing. Permission to want connection that felt alive. Permission to stop pretending that quiet suffering is the same as peace. I didn't broadcast this change. No one else needed to know. But inside, it felt like reclaiming a small piece of ground. The relationship remained. The routines continued. From the outside, nothing looked different. But I was no longer fully invested in maintaining the illusion that everything was fine. I stopped arguing with my own inner voice. Stopped dismissing it as dramatic or needy. I let it speak, even when it didn't have answers. And that's the strange part. Listening didn't solve anything. It didn't clarify the future. It didn't make choices obvious, but it gave me back a sense of alignment, a feeling that I was no longer betraying myself to keep things stable. Stability, I realized, is not the same as safety. And love, if it costs you your presence, asks too much. I don't know what happens next in this story. I'm still inside it. Still learning how to exist without shrinking. Still noticing when I go quiet out of habit instead of choice. Still practicing honesty, starting with myself. There's no clean ending, no resolution that fits neatly into words. Just a quiet shift toward being more real. If you're listening to this right now, if the room is dark and the world feels far away, I want to speak to you gently. If you've been staying in something that doesn't hurt loudly but hurts consistently, if you've been questioning whether your pain is valid because it doesn't look dramatic, if you've been telling yourself that this is good enough while slowly disappearing, you are not wrong for noticing. You are not weak for feeling this way, and you don't have to know what to do yet. Just don't silence yourself anymore. Don't tell yourself it's nothing. Don't keep shrinking to fit a space that no longer holds you. Sit with the feeling. Let it breathe. Let you breathe. This story doesn't end with a decision. It ends with awareness, with a quiet moment where you finally stop turning away from yourself. And maybe tonight, that's enough.